the way to Golgotha. The captain on duty selected 4 soldiers per condemned man, giving him command over a total of 12 soldiers. This captain was the same one who had led the arrest of Jesus the previous night. He had the 2 convicted murderers scourged, as the Romans almost always did before a crucifixion, to break the spirit of the condemned and weaken the body. Jesus did not need further scourging. The captain felt that Jesus had already been sufficiently scourged during his trial. The 2 thieves who were crucified with Jesus were from the band of robbers led by Barabbas. This group had terrorized the road between Jericho and Jerusalem for a long time. They had been caught in the act in an ambush, much to everyone's relief. It had been intended that they, along with their leader, would receive the death penalty, but Barabbas was released because Pilate had pardoned him on the occasion of the Passover. Thus, Jesus was crucified in place of Barabbas. Jesus voluntarily submitted to the crucifixion out of his own free will. Earlier, he had once foretold this with the words, "The Father loves me and supports me because I am willing to lay down my life. But I will take it up again. No one can take my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I have the right to lay it down and the right to take it up again. This authority I have received from my Father." It was still before 9 o'clock that morning when the soldiers set out for Golgotha with the prisoners. They were followed by many people, some of whom felt sympathy for Jesus. But most in this group of over 200 people were either his enemies or curious onlookers eager for the sensation of witnessing the crucifixions. Only a few of the Jewish leaders went out of the city to see Jesus die on the cross. Now that the leaders knew Jesus had been handed over to the Roman soldiers by Pilate and that he had been sentenced to death, they were busy convening to discuss what to do with his followers. When they departed, the soldiers placed the crossbeams on the shoulders of the condemned. Almost always, the condemned were forced to carry the crossbeam themselves to the place of execution. They did not carry the entire cross, only the short crossbeam. The long, upright beams for the 3 crosses had already been transported to Golgotha, and when the soldiers arrived there with their prisoners, they were already firmly set in the ground. This final journey out of the city also served as a kind of deterrent for the people, showing that the authorities were not to be trifled with. Leading the procession was the captain, with 4 soldiers surrounding each condemned man, one of whom held a small white board with the name and the crime for which he had been convicted. Thus, the people along the way could see why he had been condemned, and such a sorrowful procession almost always had the desired deterrent effect. On the white boards of the 2 murders, only their names and the word bandit were written. On the board held by the soldier walking beside Jesus was written in Latin, Greek, and Aramaic, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." This board was written by Pilate himself. Some of the Jewish officials who were present when Pilate wrote this inscription had vehemently objected. They found it humiliating that Jesus was called the King of the Jews. Pontius Pilate, however, had gently reminded them that this accusation had been their main charge. When the Jews saw that they could not change his mind, they made one last attempt to alter the inscription to say, he said, "I am the King of the Jews," but Pilate was unyielding. He refused to change what had been written. To all their further appeals, he simply replied, "What I have written, I have written." After the condemned was nailed to the cross, this board was hung above his head so that every passerby could read why he had been crucified. Under normal circumstances, it was customary to take the longest route to Golgotha so that a large number of people could see the condemned criminal. But on this day, the shortest route to Jerusalem's official place of crucifixion was taken. The cruel crucifixion was not a Jewish form of execution. Both the Greeks and the Romans had adopted this method of execution from the Phoenicians. Even Herod, in all his cruelty, had never resorted to crucifixions. The Romans never crucified a Roman citizen. Only slaves and conquered peoples were subjected to this dishonorable death. A gruesome detail is that 40 years later, during the siege of Jerusalem, the entire area around the city was filled with thousands of crosses upon which the bodies hung for weeks. As the procession of the condemned made its way through the narrow streets of Jerusalem, a dozen women who were followers of Jesus stood by, weeping. They could not bear to see their innocent teacher facing a despicable death. As he passed by, the Master turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. My work is almost finished. Soon I will go to my Father, but the times of terrible affliction for Jerusalem are just beginning. Behold, the days will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' In those days you will pray that the rocks of the mountains may fall on you to free you from the horrors." As Jesus labored on his way to the crucifixion, he was very tired, on the brink of exhaustion. Since the Last Supper, no one had given him food or water, nor had he been granted a moment of sleep. He had undergone one hearing after another until the hour of his condemnation, not to mention the insulting scourging and the physical suffering and blood loss that accompanied it. Shortly after Jesus passed through the city gate, he staggered under the weight of the crossbeam, losing his balance and falling under the heavy burden. The soldiers shouted and kicked him, but he could not rise. When the captain saw this, knowing what Jesus had already endured, he ordered a halt. Then he pointed to a random passerby, a pilgrim named Simon from Cyrene, and the captain commanded him to pick up the crossbeam and carry this heavy crossbeam the rest of the way to Golgotha. This Simon had come all the way from the city of Cyrene in North Africa to attend the Passover. He was staying with a group of fellow countrymen in a small encampment just outside the city walls, and he had come upon the commotion of the procession when the Roman captain ordered him to carry the crossbeam of Jesus. Simon remained near Golgotha for a long time that day, gathering information from many people about who Jesus was. After the resurrection and before he left Jerusalem, Simon became a courageous believer in the gospel of the kingdom. After returning home, he led his family into the heavenly kingdom as well. His two sons, Alexander and Rufus, became fruitful teachers of the new gospel in Africa. It was shortly after 9 o'clock when this death procession arrived at Golgotha, and the Roman soldiers set about their task of nailing both thieves and the Son of Man to their respective crosses.